College football is built for Oklahoma.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Go download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase over at Game Time. Terms apply. He's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams, and welcome to today's show. We're going to talk about the LSU Tigers later in the show. We'll also get into Paul Finebaum's thoughts on Oklahoma's playoff chances. But first, some old news popped up, acting like it was new news because of one Colin Cowherd and the takes that he likes to just throw out there. And hey, it's the media world we live in. You got to throw out takes. And we know Colin Cowherd's had a lot of opinions about the Oklahoma Sooners, but kind of changed some of those tunes after Oklahoma beat Texas. So we'll give him some grace on some of this because he did come back and say, hey, you know what? Maybe Brent Venables has got some things going. But it is making the rounds through the social media sphere. But Josh Pate of the Late Kick Show and 247 Sports basically had a strong rebuttal to those comments, but more so than talking about what Colin Cowherd had to say, let's focus on what Josh Pate had to say about the Oklahoma Sooners, because I thought it was really, really poignant, and I think it resets the narrative a little bit about Oklahoma, Jay. And let's start with this. So much of what's been made about Oklahoma and how they're quote unquote going to become the next Nebraska is made about their ability to recruit. Well, Brent Venables has proven that he can recruit. They've got good proximity to a great recruiting area. So Jay, let's talk about that for a second. Any thoughts that Oklahoma is not going to be able to recruit? Gone.
It cracks me up that, first off, that this video resurfaced itself,
Yeah.
right? And it's been a big conversation
never forgets.
on the internet, but it's mainly because a rival decided that they wanted to put that back on the interwebs, right? Mm-hmm. Some individual decided, that's a Texas fan, decided they wanted to put that up there on the social medias, and then they locked all of their mentions because people started to just dive into them on this, right? And yeah, Colin had this take as soon as the SEC announced our schedules. Colin put that out there and talked about how brutal our schedule is and how Oklahoma's could potentially be the next Nebraska, right? And mainly is because his premise behind it was, for those that do not recall, was Oklahoma's moving to a new conference. They're in a state that doesn't have very much talent as far as you don't get 20 players out of Oklahoma. You'll probably get 10. Fair point there, right? But then he asked questions about the ability to recruit. Now, this tells me and shows me that he doesn't either A, do his research, or 2, pay attention to how recruiting works, because Josh Pate talked about it on his show. And the big thing he pointed out was, go look at all of the places that Oklahoma has recruited. They're getting people from Dallas, because remember, Dallas is Oklahoma South, right? It's not North Texas. That's Oklahoma South. We've been owning that for the last 20-something years. That is our territory. And so we get a lot of players from there. We also get players from Florida. We get players from North Carolina. We get players from Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, everywhere. Tennessee. Oklahoma has been recruiting in SEC country for a while. And Brent Venables made a point to make sure to go get players from throughout SEC country. Also, he steals a lot of them out of the backyard of Lincoln Riley. So it's fascinating to see that, John, that people still think that Oklahoma is going to end up being Nebraska when Nebraska's situation was completely different than what Oklahoma's is today.
Right. Nebraska wasn't necessarily a top program when they moved to the Big Ten. They were kind of a second, third tier program. Bo Pelini was giving them their best success in a while. And then when he left, it all kind of deteriorated at Nebraska. Who knows what the program shape was in whenever he got there versus when he left, but it's not been good for much of the last decade. So it's two totally different situations, because Oklahoma's been a successful program for 25 years. They've had one losing season since 1998, and that was in 2022. Well, they quickly flipped the script on that. And they've recruited well. And as you mentioned, Jay, they recruit across the country. It's not they have to get everybody out of Texas. They have to get everybody out of Oklahoma. No, they can go to California. They can pick up big time prospects. They can go to Las Vegas, Nevada, Colorado, Washington State. They can go down to Florida,
Minnesota,
North Carolina, Minnesota. They're going and getting blue chip prospects across the country. One, because they have a really good scouting department, and two, because they have relationships across the country. You know, from DeMarco Murray out west to Emmett Jones down in Texas to Bates and Chavis and Venables and all the relationships that they built out on the East Coast during their time at Clemson, they've got their fingers and their recruiting focus and influence really spread out across the country. And that does not include the fact that Bill Bedenbaugh creates a ton of recruiting gravity in his own right because of all of the success that he's had putting guys into the NFL. People want to play at Oklahoma. So he kind of gets a little bit, I mean, he doesn't have to sit there and scour the internet for guys. Mm-hmm. He's going to get a lot of guys coming to him looking for opportunities. The next thing that he mentioned is the move to the SEC. And yes, the schedule is going to be tough this year. In the long run, though, this move benefits Oklahoma.
Absolutely, because Oklahoma has been living in these SEC countries and recruiting out of there. And Pate pointed this out. Recruits are saying one reason why they're definitely wanting to go to Oklahoma is Oklahoma's headed to the SEC. So this has been nothing but big benefit for Oklahoma in not only the recruiting game, but also with making more money, more investments into the school. Me and a friend was talking about this today, and he asked me, he's like, okay, with the changes with recruiting, with the transfer portal, have I seen any real changes when it comes to play where kids go and recruiting rankings and everything? And I told him, absolutely not. Because the schools that care about winning invest in their teams, and they continuously win, right? Oklahoma's one of those. That has been the history of Oklahoma. Why over the last 100 years, Oklahoma is considered one of the best college football programs of all time. They're ran very well. They care about winning. Oh, and they care about being relevant. And so Oklahoma's put the resources in to be successful with this. And so, yes, going to the SEC, now we actually play at those places. So even though kids come from Florida, like Danny Stutzman came here before the move, and now he gets to actually go back to close to his home state and play football. Can't beat that, right? Oklahoma has always cared enough to be successful. And so I thought it was very fascinating that was the one thing that Pate really pointed out because, again, you can tell who pays attention to recruiting, who doesn't. Cowherd does not have the bandwidth to keep up with recruiting. That's why he needs to lean on other people. He probably needs to find some new people to lean on, though, because the ones he's got is not giving him good advice.
Yeah, the other part of that is the SEC puts more players into the NFL than anybody. More first-round draft picks, more total plays into the NFL. And kids want to have an opportunity to go to the next level. Yep. I think about a guy like Jaden Gibson. He was committed to Florida when Billy Napier was hired in the wake of the Dan Mullen firing. Decommitted. Where did he go? To another school that was going to be going into the SEC. That kind of stuff does matter. So the final thing that was discussed, first it was discussed by Colin Cowherd in this idea that, okay, hiring a defensive-minded coach in the modern era of college football is kind of a mistake, pointing to USC's decision to throw a ton of money at Lincoln Riley to get him to come to USC. But Pate points out, it's like so much of college football isn't just about finding the right tactician, but finding just the right guy to run your program.
Yeah, and that's a key component, and I agree with Pate there, right? It's about having the right fit. But at the same time, the only disagreement I would have there is who all, over the last 20 national championships, what type of coaches were there? Majority of them, defensive-minded coach. Saban, defense. Kirby Smart, defense. Ed Ogeron, defense. He played edge. He was a defensive line coach most of his career, right? Like, as you go, Dabo Swinney's probably the closest one to not. He's the last one to not. Urban Meyer.
That's about the only one I could.
Deep. He played DB in college, though. That's the funny thing. Right? He was a defensive guy. It's very few out there that you can point to that won national championships that wasn't a defensive dude. Bob Stoops, defensive guy, right? You can go down the list of these coaches and see, the ones that are competing the most, typically are guys that either played on the defensive side of the ball or heavy defensive type of coaches. And that's going to be most important going into the SEC. Yes, there is this wave of great offenses that are showing up. But guess what teams keep shutting down these teams with good offenses? Defensive-minded teams. How do you think Georgia was winning championships, right? They were shutting teams down with their defense, right? You have to have a defense that can give you just enough to slow down those high potent offenses to where they can't be as effective, because if they don't have a defense to rebuttal you, all you're going to do is go out there and blow them out. And the beauty of it is Seth Luttrell is known for putting up numbers on the offensive side. So John, as we're talking about this, we got the best of both worlds, man.
Yeah, you got a dude that played fullback, H-back, so that's going to bring a physicality and a toughness mindset. But I think that's where the major point lies. Is you even look at a guy like Jim Harbaugh, who was a quarterback. I don't know if people would think of him as the typical quarterback. He's kind of your blue-collar, hardworking, hard-nosed dude, and that's why Michigan was able to have so much success. It's more of a mindset than it is offense versus defense. And I think most of your offensive gurus, whether it's Lincoln Riley or Mike Leach a little bit, and Cliff Kingsbury.
Brian Kelly, yeah.
Maybe now Brian Kelly, he's a very successful coach. He's been so for a long, long time, but has had a hard time getting his team over the top and winning that national title. So all that to say, Brent Venables is going to be tough, nose to the grindstone, physical, want to have a physical team above all else. And whatever the offense looks like, whatever the defense looks like from a tactical standpoint, physicality, toughness, discipline, those are going to be the hallmarks of this Oklahoma program, which is, and it's really that culture that's going to help Oklahoma win and win at a big level at some point. Could be 2024, could be beyond. Paul Finebaum had some thoughts on Oklahoma's playoff chances in 2024. We'll discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. The 2024 college football season is right around the corner. If you're still looking for tickets, Game Time's got you covered. They've got a lot of great options available. I'm looking at the Houston Cougars game. It's going to be a night game. You're going to get an opportunity to see Oklahoma in the Wilkinson throwbacks at night. It's going to look clean. Those white helmets on Owens Field look phenomenal, I'm sure. But there's end zone tickets less than $50. I'm seeing tickets, on the 50-yard line, $119 right now for that game over at Game Time. It's the best place to get last-minute tickets. It's the lowest prices guaranteed, and Game Time actually lowers the prices as you get closer to kickoff. So you can go check it out for your favorite events, whether it's Creed that's going to be coming to the Paycom Center or any Oklahoma games this fall. Go to Game Time. They've got the last-minute tickets, the lowest prices. They've also got that all-in views from your seat, and they're all-in pricing. So what you see on the website is exactly what you're going to get. No surprise fees or taxes at checkout. So go download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different from you. So now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers that bet $5 and you will get 3 weeks free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. That's right. Then with YouTube TV's base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. Huge deal. All you need is a Google account and current firm of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Shocker. One thing over there, if you go to FanDuel.com, I've been checking out Oklahoma to make the college football playoffs. Right now is a plus 490 as a yes, minus 750 as a no. I'm going to jump all over that plus 490 because, yeah, that's a very juicy number. So check it out. Go just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and download America's #1 sports book.
College football is back, and it's not too late to catch up before the season kicks off. SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12. You can get it all from Locked On's stable of college football experts by subscribing to the Locked On College Football Podcast. Who has a chance to make the playoff? What teams will cause chaos in their new conferences? everything you need to know all in one place. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Locked On College Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And Jay, the Oklahoma Sooners are going to be one of those teams contending for a playoff spot, but with their schedule, 6 teams in the top 15 of the USLBM and AP top 25. This is going to be a very, very fun / fascinating season for the Sooners. Paul Finebaum of ESPN and the SEC Network had this to say about Oklahoma's chances to make the playoffs. He said, one more school on the fringe of what I just got through saying is Oklahoma. They're an upset away, probably, from being in playoff contention. Now, he's talking about fringe playoff teams. ESPN's Heather Dinich had Oklahoma as one of their first 4 out and cited the road difficulty that Oklahoma will face. So, Jay, what do you think it's going to come down to for Oklahoma to make the playoff this year?
I agree with Finebaum on this one. It's going to be an upset of a game that we don't expect him to win. And honestly, you're looking at probably 2 games that will be the ones that people will consider as quote-unquote upsets. Traveling to Ole Miss and then Bama at the crib, right? So if we go up to Oxford and we cook them, yeah, that's playoff-bound team at that point. Because to me, once you get to that game, you'll have a very good understanding of what Oklahoma is, right? You would think I would say Red River's the game. But Red River's always all over the place. It's just there's nothing to predict. It's hard to, but at the same time, we still have to see what Texas is going to look like because they're dealing with a lot of stuff there right now, right? Like I mean, craziness there. But I'm not trying to throw that at them, but when you ain't got no running back, you put linebackers back there, it's questions, right? And of course, I've always had questions about Quinn Ewers. We'll see what he looks like. But I've never felt like he's just consistent enough. Also, he hasn't stayed healthy a full season yet. So for them, it's about surviving the entire season with what injury bug they're dealing with. Ole Miss is that one, and I think that Bama's probably the second game at home. If we can go undefeated at home, that's a guaranteed 10-win season. Guaranteed. All we got to do is go undefeated at the crib. And I have a feeling we have a very good chance. I'm waiting to see what DeBoer looks like, but by the time we play them, I think they'll have things together, so it's going to really be a challenge. That's why we talked about it last show. They're going to be challenging because of that. What games do you think would be considered the upsets that would get Oklahoma to the playoffs?
Yeah, I think the last game of the season is one of those that
LSU's a good point.
Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC, talked about it a couple months ago, could be a play-in game for the playoff. Both of those teams could be coming in at around 9 wins, and whoever wins that one could be punching their ticket to the college football playoff. I'm still of the mind that if Oklahoma has 9 wins with their schedule and they go at least 3-3 against Tennessee, Auburn, Texas, Ole Miss, Bama, LSU, replace Auburn and Missouri. If they go 3-3 against those 6 teams, they're going to have a good chance to be in the playoff because that strength of schedule is going to be so high. And that's going to be something that the playoff committee considers. Now, I know it's weird to think about a 9-3 team making the college football playoff, but this is the world that we live in now. This is the Seattle Seahawks getting into the playoffs at 7-9 and going and winning a game because Marshawn Lynch goes into beast mode. It's a different world that we're living in. This idea that we got to go undefeated to be a national title contender is not the same as it once was. We may never see another undefeated national champion. We may never see it. It could happen this year with Georgia, but it might be more 1-loss, 2-loss teams winning national titles, which I know is weird for a lot of people's worldview of college football, but it's just the new reality. And so I think there's a really strong possibility that last game of the season, it tells the tale of Oklahoma's season. Are they a playoff team? Are they a bowl team? How they handle that last month of the season is going to be indicative of what they're playing for in the postseason. Missouri, Alabama, and LSU, those could all 3 be top 20 matchups when they get to that point.
No, that's a very good point. The biggest question to me is going to be this season, and I've mentioned this before, how many actual top-ranked matchups will we have once we get to said games, right? We keep hearing about all these these ranked games, but the question is going to be, will they actually be ranked when we see them? I am in the belief that the SEC, if the SEC is much of a gauntlet as everybody says it is, I'm in the belief that there are going to be a lot of teams beating up on each other, and it's not going to be as quote unquote competitive as far as rankings go as people are trying to predict. I think there's going to be a lot of teams that's going to end up falling out the top 25 a lot quicker than we anticipate because it ain't going to be that easy for them to get around. So that's going to be one that's going to make a difference to be able to sneak in, is if we actually beat them when they're ranked, and if they can maintain some sort of a ranking once we get close to the playoffs. If that happens, you might got a good chance.
Yeah, I think of the teams that are ranked in front of Oklahoma, I mean, LSU has a chance to drop out, but if Garrett Nussmeier is the guy that we saw in the bowl game this last fall or this last winter, then, I mean, he's going to be really good. But they're replacing a lot on offense, and they've got a defense that still needs to step up. We're going to talk about them next. Missouri, that's a team that's probably going to still be a top 15 team by the time Oklahoma plays them because their schedule's so light. And if they can survive Texas A&M, Auburn, Bama, I mean, they'll definitely, if they can win all those games, they'll be a top 5 team by the time Oklahoma plays them.
Yeah, no excuse.
Yeah, I mean, Ole Miss, I think Ole Miss will probably still be highly ranked. Tennessee will be highly ranked by the time we see them. Texas will likely be highly ranked unless they get upset by Michigan. So this is an interesting schedule for Oklahoma. If they can survive it, they go 3-3, 4-2. They'll really have a strong case for making the playoffs. Again, 4-2 against Tennessee, Missouri, Texas, Ole Miss, LSU, and Bama. I mean, that's going to be as strong a case as anybody in the country for a college football playoff spot. The Oklahoma Sooners will take on the LSU Tigers in the final game of the season, a road trip to Baton Rouge, probably at night. Ooh, scary hours. We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. You can, if you're going on vacation, you can take advantage of Ibotta, get cash back on all of your purchases so you can spend more time making memories this summer and less time dreaming about them. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been taking a look at, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you can earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. It is time to join the over 50 million users who use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 for just trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code Locked On College for Ibotta. The Oklahoma Sooners, the LSU Tigers, the final game of the 2024 regular season. How much will it have an impact on Oklahoma's postseason? What do you make of the LSU Tigers, Jay, as you take a look at them from afar?
They've got a lot of questions, right? Like schedule-wise, it looks like it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. I mean, they open up with USC. I think that game tells us basically everything about how this season's going to go for them. But they've lost 5 straight first opening games in the season, right? So they're 0-1 in 5 straight seasons. But this is the fascinating thing about this, right? They lost that the last few years, but these last couple of years, they still finished the year with 10 wins. And so Brian Kelly always figures out how to right the ship. They've added new staff members, especially on defense, because last year's defense, PU.
Cheeks,
PU, stinky, awful. But they brought in, like I said, some talent when it comes to staffers, right? They snatched up Bo Davis from Texas, right? They got Corey Raymond to come back, who was part of technically all the DBU era, right? When they actually had really good defensive backs. bringing in Baker from Missouri at the defensive coordinator, which is why I'm not as afraid of Missouri, because they're still figuring out what their defense is going to look like. LSU has a chance to really be a challenge, and I think that they'll be a challenge for us because it's the last game of the season. At that point, Nussmeier should have something figured out.
Yeah, and you look at what they lost on defense, or what they're having to build up from the defensive side of the ball, because that defense wasn't good. There's a reason Jaden Daniels had to go Super Saiyan and carry the weight of Baton Rouge on his shoulders last season, is because the defense was not good. They've made some really strong additions, but how quickly will they be able to turn that over and right the ship? That's the question I think everybody's looking at. We'll find out pretty early on against USC when they take on Miller Moss and Zachariah Branch and that talented offense that USC will put on the field. By the time we get to LSU, they'll probably be looking a lot better than what they do early in the season.
Mm-hmm.
But the big question I have is on the offensive side of the ball, because it's hard to go from Jaden Daniels to Garrett Nussmeier and not think that you're losing something. I mean, Nussmeier is not going to be the same athlete, not going to be the same runner as Jaden Daniels was. Even if he throws it well, you're still losing a lot of the rushing production that Jaden Daniels put on the field. You also lost 2 wide receivers to the first round. I mean, Malik Neighbors is out there making plays in training camp right now, irritating and instigating a lot of people in training camp practices. It's hard to lose that kind of mentality. Now, LSU, they recruit well. They recruit very, very well, especially at wide receiver, along with defensive back. So I'd no doubt believe that they've got some dudes that are going to be really, really good. But are they going to be as good as what he was last year? Are they going to be as good as those 2 first-round wide receivers that they lost? The offensive line lost some dudes to the portal. Like, this is a team that had a lot of turnover, but it's still going to be a talented team.
Yeah, they should have one of the best offensive lines in the SEC. I mean, they got their 2 bookend guys are most likely getting drafted within the first 3 rounds. So we're not even going to deny that. But you make some good points here. Their skills position guys, running backs, wide receiver, young, right? Caleb Jackson's a sophomore. We'll see what he looks like. Will he be good? Will he be not? We don't know. But you don't have a Jaden Daniels being able to be the dual threat and do everything. They're going to have to be more balanced, because Nussmeier is not at all the talent that Jaden Daniels was. He's going to have to get out there. He can move, but he ain't moving like Jaden Daniels. He can throw, but he ain't throwing like Jaden Daniels. So by the time we see them, we'll have a better understanding. But yes, that team is young. I mean, Kyron Lacey's probably is the only senior out there really at wide receiver that we will have to think about. And so that means that wide receiver unit is a bunch of young guys that still going to have to prove themselves. I like our odds against them. Now, Harold Perkins might be a problem if he's used right.
Will be a problem.
Okay, correction. He will be a problem, but that's if he's used right? Last year, he wasn't a factor because he was used wrong. His freshman year, absurdly talented, but he was used right at that point, right? So the question is, will they put him in the positions to be successful that can help him end up, because he's going to get drafted, but can they put him in positions to be successful? I don't know. Now, I think Baker's a heck of a lot better defensive coordinator than what they had before. So I think that at some point they'll have it figured out. That's what's going to make it interesting, is what they look like later in the season. Because when they play us, it'll be post Vanderbilt, which I don't even know if that's considered a real game. But they'll have a stretch of Texas A&M, bye week, Bama, Florida, Vanderbilt. I think that Bama game, which will be coming off of a bye week, which is, of course, of interest, that game's going to tell us a lot about what LSU really is going to be when they see Alabama. So by November 9th, we'll be able to look at that game and be like, okay, this is probably what we're going to see for the rest of the season.
Yeah, because who that team is now isn't necessarily going to be the same team that we see when they face Alabama, and definitely when we face them at the end of the season. But Oklahoma's not going to be the same team. This is going to be a team that's going to be very battle-tested. By the time that they have to make that trip down to Baton Rouge, you will have gone to Auburn. You will have gone to the Red River Showdown in the Cotton Bowl. You will have played in Oxford. You will have gone to Columbia. Now, as much as Columbia is not one of the great college football venues in college football, that's going to be a good Missouri team. And so you will have played Alabama the week before. So you will be a battle-tested team that's seen it all. You've seen the top and some of the best in college football. by the time you have to play LSU. So you're going to be the best versions of yourself at that point. And a lot of it's going to come down to how well you handle the trip, how well you handle playing inside Tiger Stadium down there in Baton Rouge. And if you can withstand the environment and the atmosphere, the night game stuff that creates some weirdness in every matchup, no matter how good or bad LSU is, that's a lot of that. A lot of the extracurricular stuff is going to be a big part of the storyline in that game, because no disrespect to Auburn, which I know Auburn fans will take it as disrespect. No disrespect to Columbia or Oxford, but there's not an environment in college football quite like Tiger Stadium at night. There's just not.
Death Valley is a different breed. And that's all we've heard about is how much of a different breed they are. It's a different breed. And so different. For us, we just got to be able to. The good thing for us is that by the time we get to Death Valley, we've seen Oxford, which is 70, 80,000 fans. You'll see Auburn, which is 80,000+ fans. Columbia, man, 60. But you'll see all those teams, and you'll be able to be like, all right, so this is how we need to handle playing in these road games. So I think at that point, we'll be battle tested enough to be prepared. Because there's two things that travel: run games and defenses. And the way things sound, Javante Barnes looked like he's back to his old self. And we know Gavin Sawchuk's healthy. You have those two running backs, two-headed monster back, like we had against Florida State. Yeah, we're going to be good. And with this defense as highly rated as it's going to be, yeah, as long as those two show up, we're good.
Yep. Just got to have things clicking. And by that point in the season, you will have a good understanding of what your team is. And you'll have had enough peaks and valleys to know what you got to do better. But still, I'm looking forward to that one the most, because I think it's just going to be a tremendous atmosphere.
Agreed.
Like, for those that are going to be making the trip, I think they're going to have a blast. For those that are going to be watching on the television, I know Jay's going to be making that trip to Baton Rouge.
I'm making that one. Yeah, I will be there.
Yeah, he's excited for that one for sure. But for those that will be watching on television, man, I think it's just going to provide some great visuals on the screen as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun when we get to that time of the year. But it's gonna potentially be a game with playoff implications. So we cannot wait for that. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in, being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button again wherever you get your podcasts. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports, myself at John 9 Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners on all of the social medias. Also, big announcement, we will be bringing back the Monday Night Live show, 9 p.m. Central Time every Monday night throughout the college football season. It'll be Jay's first live show here as a part of Locked On Sooners. We cannot wait to talk college football. It'll be during game week. We got Temple 8 days away. 8 days to the 2024 college football season starts, and we cannot wait to discuss it all with you here on Locked On Sooners. So thanks again, and make Locked On College Football your second listen of the day, where Spencer McLaughlin is going to take you through all of the storylines, the transfer portal news, conference realignment, and more over at the Locked On College Football podcast. It's in the description. You don't got to search for it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For Jay Smith, I'm John Williams. We'll catch you next time. Boomer.
Sooner.